This game, Sonic Galactic, is genuinely one of the most beautiful and enjoyable Sonic games I have ever played. No hyperbole here. Every bit of praise you've seen for this game is true, and I'm going to say something quite bold here. This game has a quality standard I'd expect of a Sonic Mania 2. That's not to say it's simply a Sonic Mania 2 though. Far from it. It is so much more than that. It reiterates on the classic Sonic formula. No, evolving the classic Sonic formula is what they achieve with this game. This game is brilliantly beautiful and fun to play, and I'm going to spend the whatever amount of time this video is making that point. Also, just look at this animated announcement trailer I have playing. This high quality animation is all for their second demo release. Yes, unfortunately, for those not in the know, Sonic Galactic is still a demo. I get how that can be a turnoff to some people, but hear me out. Just because the game may prematurely end and cut your enjoyment short, it doesn't mean it's not worth experiencing. The fun you do have with it will be precious, and you have 5 playable characters to run through the 2.5 zones with. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, the returning Fang, and Tunnel, and OC. Yes, this game has its own original character to play as, which personally really excites me. Then again, I'm the sort of person that looks for Fangame and Pokemon fan games, so I may be in the minority here, but Tunnel makes this package all the sweeter for me. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's tame the excitement and start from the beginning as Sonic. The game coldly opens without background music, which isn't intended according to this thread from the devs here. However, we can feast our eyes on our heroes approaching this island ahead. The camera pans over to their destination in the distance, and they zoom off to the detriment of Knuckles' nap. Poor Knuckles. Our heroes bust through some badniks along their way before landing, and wow, this background is gorgeous. The cast arriving at dawn really creates this new beginning feeling. Our cast of wacky looking animals don't get too far before bumping into the new character, Tunnel, who relays the situation to them through charades. Knuckles and Fang look distrusting, while Tails is curiously peering past Fang to see what's up. It's all wonderfully expressive without a hint of dialogue, and Sonic & Co. agree to help Tunnel with his problem. If you happen to pick Tunnel as your character of choice, you get a different opening that relays greater context to his plight. He's snoozing away when a brand new egg robo with a snazzy hat and whistle comes into the scene. He directs the colorful cast of robots as they invade the island, and a frustrated Tunnel burrows up after they've moved past. What a familiar rude awakening. In the distance, however, he spots our cast on their way over, and they meet just the same way. Definitely no parallels to Sonic 3 and Knuckles here. No. Zero. There will be more parallels to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. You know what? I think I want to start as Knuckles, actually. To give a preview of what's ahead for our Echidna friend, he's got his own unique route that splinters off from the main cast in the second zone, and it provides a greater view of the story this game is trying to tell. If you want to see his alternate route for yourself, hint, go download the demo now and try this game out for yourself. I could care less about viewer retention, and I care more about getting people to experience this game. I do also understand the other side that would rather watch someone play and talk about it, so I'm here for that if you're up for it. Our adventure starts on Verdant Isle Zone, and we start off on a beach at dawn. We have a very familiar color scheme at play here, and Verdant Isle's first impressions strike me as a sort of neo-green hill zone, like what was present in Sonic Advance's first stage. We also have some new badniks in our path. This one that will destroy the bridge below if given the opportunity, a chill purple one that you need to avoid the spikes of when going to attack it, and these little pokey ones that attempt to zoom straight into you, often getting stuck in terrain afterwards. These vines that rebound you back with your momentum remind me of the ones present in Mushroom Hill, albeit less interested in curbing your speed to a halt. Just behind it we find a special stage ring, and let's talk about those, shall we? We load into a 3D section where we're tasked to collect rings. Standard stuff for special stages, but the environment we traverse is like a wholly expanded upon Sonic 2 special stage. What's different is that it's infinitely more forgiving, giving you laps around the course to remember where rings are and memorize a good path forward. UFOs from Sonic CD also float about, housing bunches of rings inside of them if you manage to bonk them on your way forward. Getting to the upper areas net you more goodies, and these 2 UFOs give me a ring multiplier and a speed up, while a later one actually adds time back to the clock. To offer some criticism in hopes of making this game be the best it can be, I have a few things I would like to mention about the special stages here. The turning can feel just a smidge too stiff at times, but that's something the levels can be designed around. For the first stage, it felt like some of these jumps were already plenty tight, so I don't know how the difficulty will scale for the later stages. That's fine if this is the intended challenge, but I thought to share my first impression with it regardless. I think the UFOs should also have some indicator on what power-up they've got inside of them, so you can strategize certain ones to prioritize. My suggestion? Make the UFOs come in clearer color variants. The general purple and yellow ones can house rings, while the other ones with power-ups can have their own color schemes. I did notice that the UFOs housing time-ups are actually blue and red, but due to the pixelation of the scene, it's hard to make out exactly what color they are until they're right in your face. It would help lots if these stages got more difficult. Finally, a smoother loop on laps would be nice. Having everything simply pop back in doesn't look the best visually. And speaking of laps, I've got another suggestion. What if later special stages upped the challenge by making it so, instead of lapping the course, you actually get turned around and then run backwards through it? Just an idea I had. Maybe having multiple points to dock your rings potentially could also help, especially if these stages will have hazards in the future that can make you lose rings. Since there's only one playable special stage so far, it's hard to know what the later ones will contain, but hopefully my opinions help in one way or another. Moving on from the special stages, we actually collect something called Galactic Gems instead of Chaos Emeralds. There's also 7 of them to collect, and I wonder if this means new super forms for our cast. A man can dream, can't he? Before we get back into the level, I want to let the zone's music play out for a couple seconds at least. Really get you a feel for what it sounds like, because I feel like this game's music is top notch. See what I mean? It's just so good. Ugh, sorry. Some of these tracks have piano in them, and it's just my favorite instrument. It is my 100% biggest weakness. The dawn transitions to day mid-stage, and the detail of the backgrounds is visually stunning. The way the zones shift and change mid-level all throughout Sonic Galactic, as well as the thematics present themselves, are top quality. Another thing I need to mention is Knuckles' sprite here. If you've been watching the Goober roll around, you've probably been impressed yourself. He's never looked better in my opinion, and a subtle detail I noticed that amps his sprite up to 11 is actually the white color present on his design. What do I mean by that? Well, it's shaded with a blue color instead of a gray, and if you know about color theory at all, you'd know contrasting a warm color, Knuckles' red and yellow, with a cool color, aka the blue shading on his gloves, helps make each color even more distinctive. It helps the details on him stand out and pop, so it's 10 out of 10 stuff. We roll on out to a longer beach portion, and a huge caterpillar bot appears to impede our progress. This is our first mid-stage boss if you haven't done the tutorial, and it uses the formula seen in Mushroom Hill Zone's second act, along with most of the bosses in Sonic Advance 2. You're constantly running, and that can be somewhat difficult to grasp. Momentum's mechanics while constantly running can be a bit finicky, but I think a lot of that comes down to the inclines present along this beach. They subtly mess with your jumps, but this fight can be done simply enough by rolling into the boss for the first phase. The second is even easier. All you have to do is just jump into the boss as he comes towards you. All in all, a great, easy first boss. What pops out after the bot's defeat appears to be another Galactic Gem. It seems to poof away after beating it, so I'm unsure if we collected it or it returns to wherever it came from. Oh well, not important at the moment. You know what is important? The new way Knuckles celebrates his victory. He reminds me of that one... Hold on, is Knuckles flipping us off here? Anyways, we're now in a deep jungle area that has incredibly large trees in the background. The mega-sized jungle really helps sell the distance we've made, going from the outer skirts of the island's beach to its insides. I love the mixing of similar thematics to keep a stage fresh, and transitions between zones were always a treat whenever they're present. Knowing how we got from one place to another enhances the world building, and makes this place feel all the more real. It still maintains aspects of the previous act in its foreground, and after making our way partially through, we come outside to the beach being our background, along with a much closer mountain range. Eggman flying by in the background signifies the end of the level is on its way, and he greets us not too long after in his newest spinning top machine. I was under the impression you could not hit him while he was charging up, but you can actually bonk the yellow glowy bit to also do damage, as well as the green underside. The timing of his electric ball attacks when he summons 2 enemies requires some tight maneuvering from the player in order to not get hit. When fighting this boss as the other characters, I used their special abilities to their fullest extent to knock out some extra hits at low risk. This boss was definitely easiest as Fang, because I would just double jump over him and get a ton of hits in really quick. By the way, it's not super apparent here, but the bosses in this game operate on a weak spot system. This means that you can only hit them in certain spots, but most bosses have multiple places where they can take damage, so it's not really too much of an issue where you're waiting for them to show their one weak spot most of the time. You can often disable attack patterns from the boss by hitting these spots, if not outright damage the boss. No boss in this demo drags on too long, except maybe the very last one, but we'll talk about it when we get there. Another galactic gem drops, and we move forward to this large purple gate that raises for us. A submarine in the background shoots a missile at us, destroying this bridge we're on and blasting us off into the water below. If you pay close attention to the background here, you can see reflections of a civilization underneath the water. Very cool and subtle enough that you could miss it if not paying attention. Gosh, I just love the sprite work in this game. This background is so gorgeous. The glazing's gonna continue as we enter the next underwater zone, bouncing down off the walls, and immediately we're introduced to another genius set of mechanics. Do you see these air bubbles along the path that surround us for a time before popping? They actually refresh your air meter. If you've played any classic Sonic water levels, you know that their design often slows down the pace of the game to a crawl, waiting for the Sonic gods or whatever higher power there is in the universe to grant you a single bubble in order to refresh your air. While iconic, also was a huge pace killer. The devs of Sonic Galactic work around this by implementing multiple air refills that keep the pace up, because they don't stop you. This ends up feeling like one of the faster levels in the game because of these adjustments. And isn't that ironic that a water level is so fast feeling? I think the devs are genuinely genius for this. These circling rings of bubbles also restore your air, so trying to get that perfect angle isn't under any time limit. Because of all these alternate ways to refill your air, the bubble piles are rare to see in the level. Going forward usually gives you a bubble or two along the path, so if you keep pace, you should be fine. No waiting around in agony as that number ticks down, spelling out your doom. These things that launch you forward at high speeds also act as air refills, so they knew exactly how to maintain the danger of a fully underwater level, but iterated on the formula to keep speed up and not make it an annoyance. If I was wearing a hat, my hat would be off to the developers. Before too long into the level, we come across a big crab batnik whose big beady red eyes are honestly pretty cute. The crab rolls up and busts through a wall at high speeds right after. And the entire rest of this act involves us sprinting around while this crab is destroying almost everything in its path. It adds a chaos that contrasts the peppy OST playing in the background. I have to say, this music and the crazy crab destroying everything in its path makes this my favorite act in the demo. Hands down. You can tell there is more to this than a simple water zone too, because corals and other underwater vegetation are preserved in these man-made structures. There's also these tall pillars scattered all about. People live here. Again, let's listen to the OST for a moment. This one is my favorite in the entire soundtrack. Let's talk about the enemies here. We have this little fish that has a bumper atop its head, a crab that fires lasers with catastrophic rumbling results, and these baddies that eat rings. They even latch onto you if they get the chance to drain rings from you, so you best watch out. I do also finally go into the bonus stages present in here, which deserves their time in the spotlight right about now, I'd say. Check this out. You need to collect all the rings in order to complete the stage, and your time limit is this glowing gold ball that chases you down faster and faster the longer you're here. It occasionally charges up to dash at you or even attempts to suck you in, so paying close attention to its distance and the sound cue is key to winning. Rolling around is somewhat loose control-wise, but it's easy enough to get the hang of with some practice. I didn't head into them too often, but it is a nice way to snag a power-up and protect your ring count, or maybe even grab a 1-up. Coming out of the special stage, listen to this alternate drowning theme. It's definitely not as intimidating as what we're used to, but it fits the vibe of the stage a whole lot better. We come to the end of the stage here, and we enter some purple ruins with these moon symbols inside of them. Look at this background, showing off a race of people that once inhabited these waters. Or do they still? We haven't seen them yet, but they clearly had a whole civilization here at some point. This crab has been wrecking their home, so I think it's time we move to stop it once and for all. This mini-boss can have both of its legs bonked off, as well as its crab arms if hit on the yellow bits specifically. In another playthrough, I go out of my way to destroy every piece of the crab, but it's easy enough to bonk it in its cute little eyes and fell it faster that way. It's another fun, enjoyable boss to fight with variable patterns and reasonable difficulty that I really enjoyed. I especially like how the crab skitters away if it sees you coming to bonk its head. I also love using Fang's and Tunnel's abilities to get pot shots on these bosses. The mastery of everyone's abilities make these levels all the better, and crushing bosses in no time flat is always going to be exciting. Now we're moving on to Act 2. Notice these walls here? Knuckles can't jump up high enough to reach the upper path, so the lower path it is for him. Remember when I talked about exclusive paths? Only Knuckles goes to this version of the act, while the others go through an entirely different area. I played through the game as Sonic first, so seeing brand new content like this got me unbelievably hyped. Areas designed for a single character take advantage of their abilities exclusively, so challenge can be tailor-made to them. Tunnel has a few spots where he can break a floor as well throughout, but there's nothing quite like this whole exclusive act for Knuckles. Since this is Knuckles exclusive, there are more spikes on the walls, and you even get some tight jumps that expect his wall climbing ability if you so fancy the challenge. These anchors that toss you forward are present on both paths. And what's this? We've got a mural. How familiar to another game. There's a prophecy involving these galactic gems, and these people seem to be the protectors of them. You know, like how Knuckles protects the Master Emerald. The parallels don't stop there, but they come a bit later. Do you see the navigation required for me to reach the special stage ring? It required me to jump off this incline, glide back into the wall with suspicious rings along it, and then find it by following them. Very well hidden, but inferable through a keen eye. I love it. This new enemy and I bump heads, and what is it exactly meant to be? Some sort of bird? A dinosaur? At first glance, I thought it was a dog. Something else to note, none of the enemies have been in any cheap places to get cheap shots, and I actually find that as we go further through the demo, there are less and less enemies overall. The Sonic Advance trilogy in particular was known for its cheap enemy placements that could easily drain lives, but thankfully, here, everything has been thoughtfully placed to minimize frustration. The game has some difficulty, yes, but it feels fair and prioritizes fun rather than knocking you into a pit if you didn't, know what was coming ahead of time. Going forward, we come across Knuckles' boss of this act, Klotzer from Pokemon. It can shoot flames at you, drop fireballs that travel across the floor, and my favorite attack, releasing bubbles that you need to bounce on in order to avoid a laser that comes shortly after. When the creature lifts its big arm, spin dash in to hit its weak spot. When the boss gets lower on health, it even switches things up. The bubble attack may lead to it shooting up in the air, attempting to quickly slam you with its huge claw arm if you're not careful. When we beat this boss, the scene shifts to a cool blue color with these large flowing pillars in the background. Along with them are huge statues, with this race of people portrayed interacting with the 7 galactic gems. In another very familiar scene with the roles reversed, Knuckles spies on a fish lady who appears to be some sort of royalty. We watch her approach this anchor-shaped shrine and toss something inside. Then, she channels some blue power, which is similar to what appears when we bust Eggman's capsules at the end of the zones if you've been paying close attention. To me, it seems to be some sort of prayer from her with how she motions with her hands, and after, a beam fires upwards for some unknown purpose. Knuckles is stunned still by the display, and when spotted, the lady he's been spying on quickly darts off. Upon following her, we come across another mural, showing a single green galactic gem atop a mountain, surrounded by waves, and there's a crescent moon above. Like we've been seeing all over the ruins up until this point. It really captures Knuckles' attention, walking backwards as he makes out the scene portrayed before him. I noticed that there are actually 8 galactic gems present in the mural, which makes me think this 8th green one is similar to the Master Emerald in some way. Perhaps they're related? Funnily enough, he bumps into the side of the screen, And when it pans over, we see Eggman is also here examining the murals, implied to have been doing the same backwalk. It's a bit of small humor, but it also establishes that Eggman is clearly investigating this power for his own nefarious schemes. Of course, that much is obvious, but it's really nice to see it. The mural now on screen shows the 7 galactic gems, an 8th one falling from the sky towards a locked door of sorts, and the lady we saw before holding a crescent moon with a gem inside. Within all of that is a rock of sorts, and I also noticed that below the mountains is another familiar looking reflection. You know, like what we saw outside prior before falling into the drink. All of this is super interesting to me, and I love seeing a classic Sonic game do more with its storytelling. Sonic Superstars really disappointed me with how little effort it put into building up any kind of story. Why was Barney in the game, you know? It just sort of happens. We don't linger on this moment too long, nor are any words exchanged. But if you take a moment to look, there's plenty being shown here we can infer information from and theorize about. If this game never saw its completion date, I would be unironically grieving the loss of whatever they're cooking up here. For now, there's way too little information for me to work with realistically, so we head up to another familiar shrine and reconvene with the main path. This boss fight has 3 heads you need to bong, all with their own attack pattern. When destroying one, Eggman briefly comes up to be whapped. He throws up water bombs while the heads peck at you, shoot out garbage, and hit you with lasers, fire, and even electro balls. Eggman's cute little turtle-esque machine is whomped, and we see more of that blue light emitting from the capsule after we open it up. We shoot off past a sign that welcomes us to Lumino City, and I wonder if this is a subtle play on Hydrocity. So, we all know how people say both Hydro City and Hydrocity, right? Is this said Luminosity or Luminosity? 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 They really did it again. The devs had to know what they were doing here. Goodness gracious, this level is so incredibly detailed. It can almost be overwhelming, but for me personally, it's just before that fine line of too much. City levels tend to be busy in general in order to sell the fact that they are a city, so that overwhelming feeling is, at least, partially intended. Thankfully, the color scheme is limited to primarily purples and blues for foreground and background elements. Yellow act as lights in the many buildings behind, as well as other decorations. And you can't go wrong with that classic royal purple and yellow. They're a match made in heaven. There's these spirals that act as upper and lower paths, blatantly labeled faster and slower. The timing to jump off of them is a bit tight, but nothing stops you from jumping over them entirely to avoid them and maintain the upper, faster path. These poles the characters swing down give us a moment to catch our bearings when zooming along, as well as just being fun to spin down. One criticism I do have is that it's not entirely clear which buildings can be stood on, or if they have multiple levels that you can stand on. I think it more so has to do with the fact that while all surfaces are highlighted to show that they are walkable, some roofs are more clearly defined as having collision, so the ones with more subtle detailing could be understood as not walkable. Also, here's an obligatory jam session with the music. What's this? Who cut off our tunes? A road sign? Then, boom! A brand new character dashes onto scene, flipping up atop these rings and declaring a challenge with both glare and finger. This new character is known as Turbo, and I want to note that his color scheme is almost an exact flip of Metal Sonic's. Blue eyes, red main coloration, versus red eyes and blue as Metal Sonic's main colors. The remainder of this act actually has the optional objective of racing Turbo to set points on the map. It's rather unclear at first. I honestly assumed he was just a background element, but I did succeed beating him to the finish lines just once in one of my playthroughs. It's incredibly difficult to beat him without knowing these maps inside and out, and the visual busyness and unclear path forward doesn't help with this. You don't have to beat him in order to progress, so it should be significantly challenging to get the power-up rewards, but most of the challenge for me came from confusion on the way forward. I'm unsure if this is just an issue I had though, or if others agree with me, but that's how I felt personally. I did also notice a few collision issues with Knuckles' gliding. He half clips into some of these objects. I found a few major bugs in my 6+ playthroughs I plan to share later, but this is one of the more minor ones that cropped up in Knuckles' playthrough, so I thought to highlight it now. We have a small cutscene with Turbo outpacing us on a straightaway, and in terms of the gameplay concept for this level, this has to be my favorite. The execution on the previous zone is much better overall, and ends up being more fun because of it, but with some extra work on luminosity, like perhaps more clear signposting of the path forward, it would be my best. Turbo being an optional challenge for the first act is exhilarating fun and encourages many replays, and I cannot wait to see what more future acts have to offer. Question: is the full name Turbo Tempo? Maybe, that's what's up here. We enter this coliseum, and we can see his pixelated image staring down at us, goading us further inside. It looks as if we're going to face off with Turbo, only for one of Eggman's robots to interject and challenge us instead. A shame, but that means they get a longer opportunity to build up Turbo's character as a rival that can outpace us. If we beat Turbo here in a 1v1, we wouldn't be as afraid of them going forward, and hiding their abilities from us let us ponder on what could be. So, the boss that ruined our competition now. This is definitely the most complex boss in this game so far. They have many different attack patterns, and they cannot be damaged between vulnerability periods. They play their guitar, send out a shockwave, play a riff that makes debris drop from the ceiling, throw their guitar at us, and even spin dash and hop towards us. Every time they shoot a puff of steam out around their head area, the boss is vulnerable to attack, so that's our time to whap them. Beyond the boss, let's look at this highly detailed background. We have a whole audience behind us, and if you pay close attention, you'll see a variety of characters you'll likely recognize. Ristar and Knights, Honey, and a few others I recognize, but not by name. There are even some egg robos in the audience, including the green whistle ring leader one. The most striking of them all has to be that Metal Sonic is present. He doesn't cheer, boo, or even react to anything that happens. All that he does is turn his head to watch the main character with that menacing stare. Also, before we move past this scene, another incomplete bit that may or may not be intended. This bird character seems to have unfinished lining, with their outline being a bold black when most other characters have one that blends with their color palette more. Act 2 then starts from here, and before we go too far forward, that's it, demo's over. I was so disappointed to know that my fun had come to an end, but we're not done with this overview in the slightest. We still have the alternate Act 2 for Coral Garden Zone, as well as 4 other characters' abilities to talk about. Let's jump back for a sec. This act features an outside version, with our characters running along the surface of this civilization's ruins. I randomly perish here for some reason as Fang, but collision bugs are something they can iron out later. Both versions of this act have the bombs we need to push into destructible walls before us, and we've got plenty of switches to hit to move forward through the level. There's plenty of these tubes to shoot through like the first act, and we need to talk about this stunning background. The first act was breathtaking in its own right, but look at the structures above the ocean here. If we hadn't played through this area as Knuckles, these symbols would have much less meaning and context to us. It's a stunning run in the night through the civilization's architecture, and we even stumble across Mr. Green Robo stealing one of the murals right off the wall. Seems the crab wasn't the only one out here destroying things, huh? The submarine that blasted us into the ocean is now firing at us once more, and we need to avoid its missiles through the second part of this act. Well, we serve them a taste of their own medicine not too far in, and move on to the boss same as Knuckles fought. Overall, this deviation makes me so happy to see, and I hope all the characters can get their own exclusive routes that tell parts of the story bit by bit. I would love if, in order to create the big picture of what's going on, you had to play as everyone all the way through. Speaking of other characters, let's talk about how the other 4 play now. Knuckles remains almost entirely the same, though the tutorial did highlight that you can apparently roll out of a glide now. I don't know if you could always do this in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but his moveset nonetheless felt very smooth, minus the moments where I partially clipped into walls. Tails is the other character that hasn't had too many changes to his base kit. He's able to cancel his flight by pushing down with the action key while flying, which is a nice change that preserves his momentum much more often. He's the most beginner-friendly character by far due to this, since you can fly above bosses and drop down onto them rather easily. His flight makes him great for accessing higher paths as well, of course. what else is flight good for, right? Most characters have upwards mobility, but his is by far the easiest and most flexible. His new sprite work emphasizes his childlike curiosity, especially his idle animation. It had to grow on me for a bit before I really appreciated it, but I grew to like it plenty. Fang's up next. His main ability is the cork gun jump. Whenever he jumps, you can hold down the jump button again to charge up a cork shot. Holding it for long enough will make him flash, and that's when you know you've got the full jump height available once you release the button. His cork can also hit enemies, monitors, and switches, so it's both offensive and good for keeping the pace. You'd be surprised at how fast his double jump can allow you to navigate certain sections when used well. It's incredibly fluid, and it's easy to hop over so many inclines with properly timed double jumps. He's fun to fight bosses with too, because of his additional mobility and cork gun, allowing some very speedy boss fights. Partially related, but for some reason, my save file as him turned into a Sonic one after completion. Did anyone else have that bug? His sprite work is as competent as the rest, beautifully imagined to be in line with the rest of the game. My only criticism for him is his end of act animation when he yawns. His mouth looks somewhat uncanny when he yawns, and I feel like some more detail would remove this feeling I have. Tunnel's a very peculiar one, but he fits very nicely into the cast once you get to grips with his abilities. His main ability is a dive, and if used on a flat surface that isn't a floating platform, you can tunnel into the ground. Very clever. You can choose one of 3 directions to shoot out from here, and you shoot very high up into the sky when you do. If used on a slope alternatively, you will zoom down it incredibly fast. Also, if you come into contact with a wall or ceiling when in the middle of one of his jumps, Tunnel will dig into that surface too, allowing you to use his ability again. Taking advantage of his mobility to clear jumps cleanly is very enjoyable, and he probably came second after Fang in terms of enjoyability. I am a little biased, however, because I love seeing new characters and playstyles added in fan projects. Thankfully, both Fang and Tunnel are great to play with. Try one of them out if you haven't already. Speaking more of Tunnel's appearance, he's visibly closer to Tails in age in both proportions and mannerisms. I can just imagine the dynamic between him and Tails, with Tunnel being very interested in Tails' gadgets, but being unable to operate them at all and perhaps breaking some of them with his claws. I can envision the oopsies, forgiveness, laughter, and bonding between them. He also rounds out the team's color scheme with his primary color being green. Blue, yellow, red, purple, and now green. We've got enough here to form our own Power Rangers squad if we wanted. His brown and green are a perfect complement to one another, and he genuinely is so well designed that I could mistake him as an official character. Amazing work done on Tunnel developers. Sonic's last, but surely not least. He's got a wonderful addition that makes him feel all the better to play. Every character, as I said, gets some vertical mobility in this game. Sonic's drop dash is back, and if you hold down the action button while pressing towards a wall, you will stick to it and drop dash up it. This is great for jumps you narrowly miss, and it works perfectly well. I never had any issues with it, and I frequently took advantage of it to save jumps on my first run. This gives him a much needed boost to help him keep up with the other characters and not just feel like a default, as well as keep up with the more vertical design of this game. It's a small, simple ability, but genuinely very genius, and I cannot praise it enough. So we went through every stage, special stage, the bits and pieces of the story present, and through how each of the characters control. Remember those major bugs I came across that I mentioned? Here's the footage I captured of them. As Tails, after completing the first act of the first zone, I flew during the entire duration of the end screen tally. When it finished, I clipped above the map and was unable to re-enter it without restarting. A simple enough fix here would be forcing characters to land and strike a pose before the tally starts. As for the second major one, in the second zone's second act, when fighting Eggman here, I managed to have him clip off screen where he became unreachable due to, presumably, destroying 2 heads in quick succession. Creating a lockout from being able to destroy more than 1 head would solve this easily enough, I imagine. Beyond some Knuckles gliding clipping and Tunnel's special stages not loading into anything, that's all the issues I had with this otherwise clean experience. I'm assuming Tunnel's assets just weren't ready for this demo, like how the opening scene's music is absent, so I mostly note it for people who have played and may be confused. The developers are likely already aware of what's missing from the demo, so we don't have to nag them about it. If you have any information for them about bugs, contact them on their socials about it, and ensure you write as detailed a synopsis of what occurred as possible. The zone, the act, the character you're playing as, and what you did to trigger it to the best of your understanding. It helps them out in a little way, and I'm sure they appreciate the feedback. With that all summed up, here are my final thoughts on Sonic Galactic 2's second demo. This is a brilliant take on the classic Sonic formula that doesn't settle for just emulating the classic, but evolving on it with a heaping helping of passion woven into every inch of this game so far. I want to see this game succeed and join the ranks of Fangame giants like Sonic Roboblast 2. I have every bit of faith the current developers are totally capable of this, but I understand it will take a long time to get there. Sonic Roboblast 2 is multiple decades in the making, so you know what? I can wait. I hope you can too, and you go follow their socials to keep up to date on their progress. That's about all I have to say here. If you've reached this point in the video, would you consider subscribing? Depending on when you see this, I've got a Sonic Adventure 2 video in the works, and from there, I have literally zero idea what I'm doing. If you have zero idea of what you're doing with your life, we should stick together. I don't even know what came over me when I wrote that into the script. Anyways, thank you for watching, and have a good day.